Welcome to Hannity, and this is a Fox News alert. A second American hostage held by ISIS has reportedly been beheaded by a member of the terror network. A new video posted online appears to show the execution of U.S. reporter Steven Sotloff. And also developing tonight, a former Pentagon official confirmed to Fox News that the president has in fact been briefed on the ISIS terror threat for more than a year. And Fox's own Catherine Herridge, she's standing by in Washington tonight with all the breaking developments, especially in light of his comments that he made last Thursday, saying that they didn't have a strategy to deal with it.
Well, Sean, a former Pentagon official told Fox News that detailed and specific intelligence about the rise of ISIS was included in the president's daily brief, also known as the PDB, for at least a year before the group took large chunks of territory in June. The official said the data was strong, adding a policymaker such as the president, who often takes his brief electronically, could only conclude the situation was getting bad. Today, neither the White House nor the Pentagon denied the claim, emphasizing that they were on top of the situation.
We've talked about ISIL for many months now, and as I've said before, we were very closely monitoring and tracking their progress, their growth, their development, well before they rolled into Mosul. So this is not an organization that we haven't been watching.
On the purported execution of journalist Steven Sotloff today, the intelligence community is analyzing the tape and the striking similarities to the execution video of James Foley posted on the web 2 weeks ago. The apparent execution of 2 Americans at the hands of Islamic extremists seems to give more credence to complaints from Capitol Hill that the president is too cautious. The State Department was asked today whether it amounts to an act of war.
I'm not going to, again, put new labels on it. I think it's clear that we are concerned about the threat of ISIL to Western interests, to interests in the region.
Another hostage believed to be a British citizen is shown at the end of the latest video, and there is a warning from the executioner to those who join any U.S.-led coalition against ISIS that more executions are coming, Sean.
Now, let me ask you, Catherine, past presidents have always gotten their daily briefing, and they would usually ask questions about it. In your report, the official said that the data was strong and granular in detail for over a year now. But the president never followed up, never asked any questions, never was briefed by anybody?
Well, typically the president's daily brief is an interactive process between the principal, the president, and the briefer typically comes away with more questions after they deliver the brief, more follow-up, if you will. My contact, the former Pentagon official, said that he's speaking generally not the case with this president, that there was follow-on requests, or what they call taskings, in the intelligence community.
All right, Catherine, thank you. Startling
You're
report
welcome.
tonight. Appreciate it. And Fox's own James Rosen, he attended the State Department briefing earlier today. He pressed the spokesperson, Jen Psaki, on whether this purported execution video qualifies as an act of war by ISIS. And he joins us now from Washington with the details. They wouldn't answer that question, James.
Well, there was an answer, perhaps to some Americans not satisfactory, Sean. Good evening. Look, there are a number of reasons, good ones, for Americans to believe that we are, in fact, at war with the terrorist army known as ISIS. For one thing, as you just mentioned, they are beheading American citizens. For another, the Defense Department is conducting airstrikes against the group in Iraq, and the Commander-in-Chief has formally reported to the Congress about those airstrikes under the terms of the War Powers Act. Yet, in my exchanges at the daily press briefing today with State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki, she repeatedly declined to embrace that term, at war. A lot of Americans sit at home and they see Americans who are not even combatants but who are journalists being beheaded by this group overseas. And from a sort of common sense point of view, the average American will say to himself, this group is at war with us. Why does our president or our Secretary of State not recognize that and say, indeed, we are at war with this group and we will destroy them?
Well, I think, first of all, James, our actions speak for our commitment to this. And the president has authorized more than 100 strikes in Iraq, as has been confirmed by the Department of Defense. So I think any American sitting at home should sit and look at the actions that we're taking. I don't think it's a useful exercise to go back and forth about new terms. What's important is what we're doing about it, and the President's authorization, what the Secretary will be doing over the next couple of weeks is action in that regard.
Jen Psaki also said this is not an overnight thing. It's a long-term commitment, that it is the mission to defeat and destroy ISIS. I asked if the president can assure the American people that mission will be completed before he leaves office. Jen Psaki said she would decline to place a time frame or a deadline on it. Sean?
James, amazing exchange, and the president said Thursday that there is no plan. Also at this briefing today, they won't tell us how many Americans are being held by ISIS?
Right. Well, they may not actually have that information in concrete terms. Understand, this is a non-state actor. It's occupying territory in Syria and Iraq that is somewhat remote at times. We don't even have a firm grip on exactly how many foreign fighters have fled to this battlefield and to Syria and Iraq to go join the fight with ISIS. So that's something that's a fluid figure, I would say. In fairness to the administration, I don't think they exactly know how many Americans ISIS is holding.
All right, James Rosen at the State Department tonight. And for the White House's reaction to all of today's breaking news, we turn to Fox's own Ed Henry. He's traveling with the president. He's in Estonia tonight. Ed.
Well, Sean, good to see you. The reason why the president is making this stop here to this Baltic nation is to send a signal to Russian President Vladimir Putin that the U.S. will stand up for key allies in Europe. A sign, though, that there are many crises the president is dealing with because, as you know, Putin has not been listening, still has been pushing forward tanks, troops going into Ukraine, another neighboring country here in Eastern Europe. And the bottom line is president juggling all of this, no doubt, on this trip, given the fact that this video emerged of a second American journalist apparently being beheaded, and on Catherine's reporting in terms of how long the president has known about this threat from ISIS. Remember a key point in all of this when she says that about a year ago this information about the threat was being put in his presidential daily brief by intelligence officials. 1 year ago, August 2013, the president was actually asked at a news conference about terror groups like ISIS, and here's what he said.
And so that requires us then to make sure that we have a strategy that is strengthening those partners so that they've got their own capacity to deal with what are potentially manageable regional threats.
The key part there, the president a year ago saying we need to be putting together a strategy to deal with these extremists, these terrorists. No doubt when he has a news conference here in Estonia tomorrow, he's likely to be asked by reporters about that statement last week about how he still does not have a strategy to deal with ISIS militarily in Syria, given the fact that a year ago he said he was trying to put together a broader strategy, not specifically about Syria, number one, and number two, no doubt we'll get questions about the beheading, the apparent beheading of this second American journalist. Bottom line is U.S. officials here on the ground in Estonia tell us they're still trying to authenticate that video. The intelligence community, as you can imagine, pouring through it for any details they can figure out at this late hour.
Hey, Ed, so what we have in the last 5 days emerging is ostensibly Russia's invasion into Ukraine, Putin saying that they could take Kiev in 2 weeks. We have Islamists taking control of Tripoli in Libya. We've got what appears to be a beheading of an American journalist, the second one. The president saying last Thursday, we don't have a strategy, but yet he told us that ISIS was the JV team and the tide of war is receding. Is he getting a lot of heat when he's on the road with the press?
Well, he's getting heat from his own fellow Democrats. Remember what Senator Dianne Feinstein said over the weekend on NBC when she said they're not the JV anymore, these are the varsity folks. That's a sign that some senior people, the Intelligence Committee chairwoman in the Senate, giving him heat and saying we've got to step up the game, clearly was the message from her. I think when you ask about Putin, specifically something to keep an eye on is the big piece of this trip is after this stop in Estonia, the president's going to Wales for a NATO summit. One detail leaking already is that they hope to have a deal where NATO will create a new 4,000 troop sort of rapid response team in Eastern Europe that could respond to Russian aggression. Russian officials today laughed that off and said, look, if NATO is going to expand, we're going to change our military strategy as well. And as you say, it leaked out that in a phone call, Putin said he could take Kiev in 2 weeks. So the bottom line is the president is trying to maneuver here on the world stage and deal with these threats, but some of the leaders around the world seem to be sort of shrugging it off.
All right, Ed Henry in Estonia tonight. Ed, thank you. Appreciate it. And here with reaction to all of today's breaking news regarding President Obama's knowledge of the ISIS terror network, Fox News strategic analyst Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters is with us. I think the most damning bit of information, besides obviously the horror and the outright evil that exists with ISIS itself, is the fact that the president had been briefed in detail about all of this and asked no questions as past presidents have done. That was shocking to me. Your reaction?
Well, it is shocking. I mean, this is a president with remarkably little curiosity about the world, seemingly unable to learn what works and what doesn't, what's necessary and what's not. But one thing I have to say that my personal analysis on this is that the reason he didn't want in-person briefings because he just didn't want briefings at all. So he says, I'll take them electronically. And that doesn't mean he read them. He probably at most skimmed through the parts that didn't interest him about Islamist terror, etc. And so he was basically, in my view, utterly ignoring, throwing away the tremendously hard-won inputs our intelligence community was trying to send to the White House. So, Sean, in his peculiar way, he may be being honest when he says, well, he didn't know, he wasn't warned, because he didn't read the books.
Well, that's his job, Colonel. I mean, we all have jobs to do in life, and maybe there are days you don't feel like doing your job, but that's his job. That's his foremost responsibility. You know, look at where we are in the last 5 days. I was asking Ed Henry, you've got Russia, Ukraine, you've got Kiev, the comment by Putin, you've got Islamists taking Tripoli, you've got the beheading of another journalist, and a president that said Thursday, which I don't think was wise at all, we don't have a strategy yet.
Yeah.
Well,
and you got the Chinese rolling over our aircraft.
Yeah.
You've got Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, everything, of course. Well, I mean, he's clearly disengaged. But, you know, Sean, you and I have talked about him for a long time and his lack of a strategy. And I've been whining, to put it honestly, about that he won't make a decision. But, you know, I'm starting to feel like he can't make a decision. That we have a president who has a real psychological problem, that he can't face responsibility, and certainly not the responsibilities of his office. But again, I mean, look at how he doesn't even want to be in the Oval Office. He wants to be on the road. He wants to be at fundraisers. We may have a president who is just incapable of rising to the challenges of the office.
Is it because of his radical indoctrination? I'm not trying to psychoanalyze the president here. I live my life, Colonel, with a sense of urgency and purpose in everything I do. You know, I've got to get on the air. I've got to be prepared. I do my job. I don't see that he has the urgency to be president. I mean, juxtapose everything that's happened with a picture of our Secretary of State out kite surfing and this president vacationing and golfing in the midst of one crisis after another. It's alarming at best, and more importantly, I don't know how the rest of the world is perceiving this. You know, we have the king of Saudi Arabia telling us they're going to be in Europe, ISIS, in a month, and they'll be in America in 2 months. Now, I would even argue that there's probably a strong case to be made that they may already be here. What are your thoughts?
Well, they are here, and they are
here
in Europe.
So we are going to get hit again.
Yeah, inevitably we will get hit again. But you know, there's such. I can tell you what the world thinks of us. The world thinks this greatest superpower in history is weak and indecisive and can't move and is afraid. They think we're afraid. They think the American people have turned into cowards, which we have not. But the president, he won't call the invasion of Ukraine an invasion because he said that there would be consequences if Putin invaded Ukraine. So he just won't use the word invasion. We won't call the war against Islamist terror a war, even though they do absolutely believe they're at war with us. Look, fanatical Islam is at war with us, has been at war with us, and will be at war with us. And even if we act decisively, it's going to go on beyond our lifetimes because of the utter collapse of Middle Eastern civilization. It's gone over the cliff. And this is a president who just can't face it. The world has disappointed him, and he's turning his back on the world and on the people who elected him, on all of us.
It's a pretty chilling analysis. Colonel, thank you. Appreciate your time tonight, as always. Coming up, we have a Hannity exclusive tonight, Unfiltered. Duck Dynasty's Phil Robertson will be here for a rare in-studio appearance. We'll ask him about the rise of radical Islam around the globe. But first, new video surfaces purportedly showing the beheading of an American journalist, Steven Sotloff. So how will the Obama administration respond, or will they? The former U.S. ambassador to Iraq, he's next. That and much more on what is a very sad and busy news night on Hannity.